The boutique restaurant was called Aura. It occupied the penthouse level of the historic Tribune Tower in downtown Chicago, featuring soaring 30-foot glass walls overlooking the glowing city skyline. It was the exact kind of high society establishment where reservations required a 4-month wait and appetizers began at $90. I walked through the brass revolving doors wearing a $90 navy dress from Nordstrom Rack and flat shoes I'd worn to work for 3 years. My older sister, Victoria, stood near the velvet rope in a custom Italian silk gown that likely cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her husband, Harrison, adjusted his platinum watch, radiating the quiet arrogance of high stakes corporate law. "Oh, look who actually showed up," Victoria said as I approached, her smile tight and purely performative. "I genuinely wasn't sure if your schedule allowed for a night out." "It's Mom's 65th birthday," I said evenly. "I wouldn't miss it." "Well, let's just hope you didn't overextend your budget coming here," she whispered, leaning in as the maitre d' led us toward the private dining suites. Harrison had to pull 3 separate favors with the managing partner just to secure this room. I didn't argue. I simply followed her past tables of Chicago's elite toward the back room where our family was gathering. The private dining suite was breathtaking. A custom mahogany table set for 10, with hand-blown crystal and gold-rimmed china. Through the panoramic glass, the Chicago skyline stretched out like a field of frozen lightning. Mom sat at the head of the table in an emerald dress, looking every bit like the suburban matriarch she strove to be. Dad was beside her, swirling a glass of vintage bourbon. My brother Ethan and his fiancée were already seated, along with Victoria's wealthy in-laws. "There she is," Mom announced, standing up to give me a brief, distant hug. "We were starting to think traffic caught you." "Traffic was heavy on the I-90, I replied. "Well, sit down, dear." Mom pointed casually toward the far end of the long table. "We saved a spot for you." The seat was at the absolute farthest corner, wedged between my teenage nephew, who was glued to his gaming handheld, and an empty service tray, the least desirable seat in the room. I sat down without a word. Victoria naturally claimed the seat directly to Mom's right. "Shall we start with the 2008 Dom Perignon?" Harrison announced to the room, snapping his fingers for the sommelier. "Only the finest for family." When the sommelier arrived and began pouring the champagne, he reached my glass. Victoria immediately held up a delicate hand. "Oh, actually, just sparkling water for my sister," Victoria said sweetly. "Champagne at this tier is a bit steep on the final split." "I'll have the champagne," I said, looking up at the sommelier with a calm smile. The sommelier looked between us for a fraction of a second before nodding smoothly. "Of course, ma'am," he said, pouring my glass to the exact line. Victoria's smile stiffened, but she raised her glass. "To Mom, 65 years of elegance." Everyone clinked glasses. The champagne was flawless, crisp, perfectly aged, with subtle notes of toasted brioche. As the first course of seared scallops and caviar arrived, Victoria leaned across the corner of the table toward me. "Just so you aren't shocked when the bill arrives," she murmured softly. "Each starter is about $80. We thought everyone could chip in a little. Maybe 100 from you if your bank account can handle it." I took a slow sip of champagne and nodded. 100 is fine. The main courses were served next. Dry-aged Wagyu ribeyes, butter-poached lobster tails, and pan-seared Chilean sea bass. Every dish was a masterpiece. "This steak is incredible," Victoria announced, cutting into her ribeye. "Harrison, you really know how to pick a venue. The manager told us this place is owned by a massive private holding group that's taking over the Midwest luxury market." "Only the best for family," Harrison beamed, adjusting his cufflinks. Across the table, my brother Ethan was bragging about his recent corporate bonus, while my aunt was talking about her villa in Florida. Everyone was performing, desperate to show off their curated status and financial wins. I ate my sea bass in quiet appreciation. The fish was cooked to absolute perfection, flaky and rich. "So, Elena, how's the little tailor shop?" Ethan asked eventually, turning to me with a polite, half-amused smirk. It's doing great, Ethan, I replied calmly. Still working the front desk at that sewing store in West Loop? Victoria chimed in. What are you now, shop manager? Something like that, I said gently. This was the narrative they had built for me. 5 years ago, I had resigned from a high-paying corporate strategy position and told the family I was stepping away to figure out my next chapter. I had started working at a small, struggling alteration and boutique shop in downtown Chicago, cutting fabric, measuring hems, and managing the morning counter. What I had never bothered to explain to them was that I didn't just work there. I had bought the entire boutique, the building it sat in, and built a luxury fashion and hospitality holding group around it. It must be nice, Victoria continued, shaking her head condescendingly. No high-stakes pressure, no major corporate responsibility, just measuring pants all day. Of course, the income must be pretty modest, but there's no shame in simple work. Not everyone is built for real ambition. Victoria, please. My dad cleared his throat slightly. Let's keep it pleasant. I'm just being supportive, Dad, Victoria protested smoothly. I think it's sweet that Elena is content with a quiet, basic life. The meal ended with elaborate molten lava cakes and artisanal cheese boards. As the servers began clearing the dessert plates, Victoria leaned close to me once more. So, about that $100 for your share of the dinner, she whispered. Are you sure you can cover it? Or do you need Harrison to discreetly handle it for you? I can cover it, I said quietly. Good. Honestly, I was worried you wouldn't even be able to afford the Uber back to your apartment. Harrison overheard her and let out a quiet, smug chuckle. Before I could answer, the double doors of the private kitchen swung open. Executive chef Marcus Laurent, an internationally renowned culinary icon who rarely stepped into the dining room, walked straight out. He was accompanied by the general manager of Aura. The entire table went silent. Guests at surrounding tables turned to watch as Chef Laurent walked straight past Harrison, straight past Victoria, and stopped directly beside my chair at the end of the table. Miss Vance, Chef Laurent said with a respectful, warm bow. I was informed you were dining with us tonight. I wanted to personally ensure that every single dish met your standards. A heavy, stunned quiet settled over our table. Every conversation froze. I smiled warmly at him. The sea base was exceptional, Marcus, and the service has been flawless. I am delighted to hear that, Chef Laurent replied smoothly. The entire culinary team is at your disposal. Please let the front house know if you need anything else from the holding accounts. He gave another brief bow and stepped back toward the main kitchen. For 5 solid seconds, nobody at the table moved. Nobody breathed. Victoria was the first to find her voice, though it sounded thin and cracked. Why did the executive chef just call you Miss Vance? Why did he come out to check on you? I wiped my hands with a linen napkin and set it down. Probably because I own the restaurant. The silence in the private dining room was absolute. Even my teenage nephew put his gaming handheld down, staring at me with wide eyes. You... what? My mother stammered, her fork hovering in midair. I own Aura, I said calmly, taking a measured sip of water. I bought the top 2 floors of the Tribune Tower 3 years ago as part of a commercial real estate expansion. Victoria's face drained of all color. That's impossible. This restaurant is part of the Sterling Hospitality and Design Group. It's valued at tens of millions. That's correct, I confirmed smoothly. Sterling Hospitality is the parent company. Aura is our flagship restaurant, alongside 4 other dining concepts across the city. Plural? My dad asked, his jaw slightly slack. 5 restaurants, a boutique hotel in the Gold Coast district, and the original tailoring building in West Loop, I explained gently, along with the fashion design line that operates out of it. Harrison immediately pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he searched the Illinois corporate registry. A few seconds later, His face turned completely white. Holy shit, Harrison muttered, his voice cracking. Sterling Group, Managing Director and 100% shareholder, Elena Vance. Annual revenue estimates, $18 million. He turned the screen to show Victoria. There was my professional executive profile, my portfolio of properties, and the full corporate breakdown. But you work at a sewing shop, Victoria whispered, her voice sounding strangled. You measure hems. You work the morning counter. I work the morning counter because I built that business from nothing, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. I started that shop 6 years ago. I still work there 2 mornings a week because it keeps me connected to my roots. It reminds me where I started. My brother Ethan was staring at me as if I were a complete stranger. Elena, how did you buy all of this? Where did you get that kind of money? I saved every single bonus and commission from my corporate job, I said evenly. I lived in a studio apartment for 4 years, drove a 10-year-old car, and invested every dollar I had into buying a failing alteration shop for $45,000. I turned it around, made it profitable, bought the building, and used the equity to acquire my next property. 6 years of 18-hour days, strategic acquisitions, and calculated risks. Why didn't you ever tell us? Mom asked, her voice trembling as she pressed a hand against her chest. I tried to, I replied softly. 4 years ago, when I opened my second venue, I invited the whole family to the ribbon cutting. Everyone said they were too busy with Victoria's promotion dinner. When I acquired Aura, I called to share the news, and the conversation was immediately steered back to Harrison's law firm partnership. Every time I tried to share my world, it was minimized or ignored. So I stopped trying. It was easier to let you believe I was unambitious than to constantly fight for your respect. A thick, uncomfortable silence washed over the table. Just then, the head waiter approached the table, holding a leather-bound bill folder toward Harrison. Your check, sir? Harrison took it with a shaking hand, opened it, and swallowed hard. $7,400. That won't be necessary, I said smoothly, pulling out my phone and tapping a quick note to the management system. The entire table is comped tonight. Consider it my birthday gift to you, Mom. Elena, you don't have to do that. Harrison started, his voice completely lacking its usual smug authority. I can do whatever I like, I interrupted gently with a polite smile. It's my restaurant. Chef Laurent returned a moment later, accompanied by a sommelier, carrying a dust-covered bottle. Miss Vance, a special gift from your personal cellar for your mother's birthday. A 1996 Chateau Margaux. He poured a tasting portion into Mom's glass. She took a sip mechanically, looking at me with eyes full of overwhelming realization. It's wonderful, Elena, she whispered. My dad cleared his throat, looking down at his hands. 18 million! And we've been worrying about your rent. I even offered you a small loan last Christmas because I thought you were struggling. I appreciated the thought, Dad, I said genuinely. But I've been doing fine. More than fine. Victoria was quietly crying now, staring down at her lap. I've been so condescending to you for years, she choked out. I treated you like you were lesser, like I was superior because of titles and expensive dresses. Yes, I said honestly. You did. I'm so sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry, she sobbed softly. Why didn't you ever call me out? Why didn't you put me in my place years ago? Would you have listened back then? I asked quietly. Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She knew the truth as well as I did. Mom reached across the table, taking my hand tightly in hers. I am so proud of you, Elena. I'm so sorry it took me this long to truly see who my daughter is. You see me now, I said softly, squeezing her hand back. That's what matters. When the dinner concluded, we all walked out toward the valet. Victoria walked up to me near the revolving doors, her eyes red. Can we can we have lunch next week? She asked in a quiet, humble voice. Just the two of us. No status, no flexing. I just want to listen. I'd like that, Victoria, I replied with a warm nod. I got into my reliable 3-year-old sedan and pulled out onto the Chicago streets, driving past the glowing lights of the Tribune Tower and the historic buildings I owned. My phone began lighting up with texts, apologies, congratulations, lunch invites, and messages from family members who had suddenly remembered I existed. I smiled, set the phone on silent, and focused on the road. Tomorrow morning, I would wake up at 6 a.m., head to my little shop in West Loop, make a fresh pot of coffee, and hem a few dresses for my regular customers. I would continue living life on my own terms, with quiet confidence and unshakable peace. My family finally knew who I was, but more importantly, I had never lost sight of who I was in the process.